Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, July the 30th, 2024. So today I don't have a particular topic I want to talk about, though there are a few things going on in the news which I think might be worth discussing. First of all, we've had this Hezbollah attack on this town in around Golan Heights, is that right? Somewhere around there. And some children were killed, and Israel is working out a response, and this raises a question about what is happening in Israel, and in particular what is happening with Benjamin Netanyahu. So I have looked at his chart recently, but I thought I'd have another look at his chart, particularly in light of the fact that he does have transiting Uranus square his Mars. Netanyahu has his Mars at around 26 Leo, and so we've got Uranus in Taurus square his Leo Mars, so I think that might be something worth considering. And I also thought it's worth considering the relationship between Benjamin Netanyahu and Kamala Harris. Obviously, they were born in different years, but their birthdays are only one day apart. They are both Librans. So I'm wondering, what is the issue between Netanyahu and Kamala Harris? Maybe their fates are going in the same direction. But what we can say is that there is this link between the two. And interestingly, Benjamin Netanyahu was born on a new moon at around 27 Libra, and Kamala Harris was born on a full moon around 27 Aries. Kamala Harris was born exactly on a full moon. So I thought I would just have a look at the way these two politicians are sort of linked up. And what else has been going on? Venezuela. We've had elections in Venezuela, and the Maduro government, have declared victory. Of course, not everyone, but certainly the United States and a lot of South American countries in the West are suggesting that these elections are fraudulent, that they do not reflect the will of the Venezuelan people. Maybe right, but I suppose we always have to be careful when looking at these kind of things, because it's clearly in the United States' interests for the Venezuelan government to fall. So if you want a government to fall, then of course a good thing to do is to question its election, and then that would perhaps encourage popular unrest. Maybe the military would step in, and you'd get some kind of coup or a revolution, and you'd have a government, a new government which would be America friendly. I'm not saying it is the case. I mean, I'm certainly sure, but to some extent, that the United States is doing what it can to overthrow the Venezuelan government. But I suppose it may be a question that we don't exactly know the truth. No, I suppose it seems to me logically that there's something a bit wrong with this election, but we shouldn't necessarily take that for granted. So there are a few things that I wanted to talk about. Oh, J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is getting a lot of criticism at the moment, isn't he? Particularly, obviously, mainly from the Democrats, talking about childless cat women. I mean, he got a lot of flack for that. I think the context was he was saying that Americans had to have more children, and according to him, a lot of the people running the Democrat Party don't have any children. And I suppose an example he might have is Kamala Harris. It seems to be a somewhat insensitive thing for him to have said, even though he did say it a few years ago. But still, he is getting criticism, and I was just wondering what is going on in J.D. Vance's chart. So there are a few things I want to look at, but I don't have any specific topic I want to focus on. So before I look at what's going on in the news, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, July the 30th, 2024. So here is the chart. Top right, we've got Benjamin Netanyahu, got Kamala Harris, JD Vance, and that is Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela. And I will be looking at his chart, even though I don't have his time of birth. So I'm not saying there's a tremendous amount of things happening today. So let's see. We've got the moon. Where's the moon gone? The moon is in Gemini. The moon is in Gemini for certain. Doesn't matter where you are, what your time zone is, got moon in Gemini. So with the moon in Gemini, there might be a fair amount of conversation. People do want to communicate right now. And perhaps the emphasis is on thinking rather than feeling. If you look at the overall picture, we don't have too much water in the chart. We've got Saturn in Pisces, we've got Neptune in Pisces. So yeah, Saturn and Neptune, these are slow-moving planets. That doesn't really give us a great deal of water, does it? So there may not be so much emphasis on emotion there. Of course, there's always emotion at some level. And actually, there's not a great deal of Earth. Earth is relying on Mercury in Virgo. I suppose Uranus is in Taurus, but Mercury is in Virgo. So I suppose in terms of the way we think, the way we look at the world, we do understand material details. But in many respects, it's a somewhat fire air chart right now. A lot of fire, all those Leo planets, a lot of air, all those Gemini planets. So that's a picture, and it is, in that sense, quite a positive day. Now, when I use the word positive and negative, I sometimes get into trouble for this, but when I say positive and negative, I don't mean positive in the sense of being positive, and I don't mean negative in the sense of being negative. When I say positive, I mean taking the initiative, action, giving something out. When I say that's for positive. For negative, it's more about being receptive. And water and earth are the receptive signs. So when you've got a lot of planets in fire and air, it's quite positive. It's a day when people are giving things out. And the negative side of so much positivity is there might be a certain lack of reflection. People might not be considering what is happening around them, feeling the vibes. It's more about making fast decisions, thinking about these fast decisions, and perhaps talking a lot. And we have the moon in Gemini, and the moon is not just in Gemini, it's making a conjunction to Mars and Jupiter. In fact, at noon New York time, it's halfway between making a conjunction to Mars and a conjunction to Jupiter. So it's kind of on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. So there is that sense today of action, excitement, wanting to communicate, wanting to change things. We're not just happy to sit and watch. And there's some danger, perhaps, moon conjunct the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, that we might overdo it. On the other hand, it can also be about successful action. And so that's the overall picture. Shouldn't forget that the moon is also sort of making a trine to Pluto. It's quite a weak trine to Pluto because it's separating, though I think you're going to more feel that trine to Pluto if you're in sort of East Asia, Australia, New Zealand. I don't think if you're in the Americas that moon trine Pluto is particularly relevant, but with that moon trine Pluto, there's a certain amount of focus on power. What can we do to actually make things happen, to transform the world around us? So that might be a way in which the moon trine Pluto can work. And as far as any other aspect is concerned, Venus biquintiles Neptune. So Venus is in Leo, Neptune is in Neptune's in Pisces, so they're 144 degrees apart, and so that is 2/5 of the circle. So Venus biquintile Neptune, it tries to go against the trend. You know, we have a trend where we do have a lot of positive planets. People want to move forward. They want to have an input, and there's not much reflection. But some of us may be trying to reflect. We're trying to create emotional ties between ourselves and not just the people around us, but also perhaps our unconscious. And we're trying to be sensitive, and we have to make a real effort to be sensitive, because sensitivity doesn't just happen today. It has to be worked on. And maybe that's Venus biquintile Neptune. It could also be quite artistic. Venus biquintile Neptune. Biquintile is very much about what we're trying to create, the kind of style we're trying to create. And so with Venus biquintile Neptune, you know, some of us may have sort of elevated artistic ability. So that perhaps might be something that we want to tune into. I suppose a reminder now, when we talk about, while we're on the subject of Neptune, Neptune is pretty much exactly on skeet. So it does give sort of a broad idea about what kind of world we're living in, and it is kind of accident prone, Neptune on skeet. Yeah, things can happen. We still have to be careful with water, but there's nothing actually aspecting Neptune right now. I mean, making a hard aspect like conjunction, opposition, semi-square, sesquiquadrate. So although Neptune is on skeet, maybe we shouldn't worry about it too much. But obviously, if we take big risks with water, well, you know, anything can happen, because skeet is connected with shipwrecks. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, so let's change the coordinate system to have the heliocentric view. Venus is still making an opposition aspect to Saturn. Okay, it's separating, but I think we're still going to feel that heliocentric Venus opposition Saturn at some level. You know, Venus opposition Saturn is not a particularly emotionally fluent lineup. It may just feel that when we look around us, there seems to be a lack of emotion and a lack of sensitivity, and that perhaps ties in with the fact that from a geocentric point of view, there aren't many planets in water signs. We're relying on Neptune and Saturn, so things may be a little bit transactional in terms of the way people relate to each other. The human side of things may be forgotten, and it may be more about what people can offer, and you know, whether one benefits or doesn't benefit from a particular interaction. So that's just the way it is. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Venus opposition Saturn tends to be quite a collective aspect. So it may not just be about us as individuals, but just maybe just the way the world feels at this moment. So I don't think there's anything really else to report. Mercury is starting to make a heliocentric square to Neptune, and that Mercury square Neptune, I suppose over the next day or two, communications may be a little bit up the creek, particularly communications by water, by sea. That's not something that all of us have to deal with, but I suppose it can happen. I don't know. Where was I thinking? I mean, I don't know. When I was in Kerala, you know, I was on the. You had boats were really important. You'd have these boats going from, where was it? These two towns in Kerala in southern India, where you'd have these boats, and you just have the Keelon to Aleppi boat trip. And so, yeah, in some parts of the world, the boats are boats and sea and transport by sea and day-to-day transport by sea, that by water, by river, and so forth, could be undermined a little with Mercury semi-square Neptune. So if you do rely on water for travel or communication over the next couple of days, maybe you have to be a little bit careful. And that's a heliocentric picture. I'm not really saying that very much is going on heliocentrically. So let me now turn to the geocentric solar system and look at the chart. Look at the chart from that perspective, and now I'm going to consider the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, July the 30th, 2024. Aries. Aries, you're feeling energized. And I think, Aries, that you have a lot to say for yourself. And it is possible that some of the things you say may just be fairly trivial. You speak for the sake of it. But amongst all the words, you definitely have got something very useful to contribute. There's just something that people need to know about, people need to hear about. And today you can be a very effective messenger. And in some respects, it may actually be your duty. I mean, not just today, but over the next couple of days, it may be your duty to deliver some kind of message. And it may be a message that you don't entirely want to deliver. You perhaps take the view that maybe people can work it out for themselves. But, some people can be very, I won't use the word dense, but they can be deliberately insensitive. And so sometimes it just has to be spelt out. And of course, Aries as a sign is very good at spelling things out in no uncertain terms. So if you need to criticize someone or point out the obvious, then today and the next couple of days would be, I think, a great time to be doing it. And, overall, Aries, you're perhaps starting to feel the first impressions of a Mars-Jupiter conjunction. Now, that Mars-Jupiter conjunction is a long way away. I mean, it's Mars and Jupiter are 8 degrees apart, but still, the Moon is conjunct Mars, the Moon is conjunct Jupiter. So, because of the Moon's connection between Mars and Jupiter, you are starting to feel that energy. Okay, the energy will go away again temporarily, but it is about feeling that energy, the feeling that you just have to go and do something. And, I think, as I've already suggested, it is a time to make things happen. And perhaps you have to go somewhere. Perhaps people haven't understood you, and you have to make it absolutely clear that they understood you. You try to communicate people with phone or by text message, but maybe they still don't understand. And if they don't understand, it might be a case where you have to make it clear to them face to face. And I really don't want to underestimate your dynamism at the moment. And the Sun is still sextile Mars. You still are energized by that sextile. Sure, it was exact last week, but it's still around. It's still making things happen. So that Sun sextile Mars, I think, could be really very useful. And at the same time, you shouldn't underestimate your creativity. This is a creative time for Aries. The Sun is in Leo, Venus is in Leo, and in the Aries horoscope, Leo is really an extremely creative sign. So don't underestimate what you can put out, and not just in terms of art or music, but perhaps in terms of business and entrepreneurial skills. You know what you're good at, Aries, and if you know what you're good at, you need to be able to express it, and that's something that I think you should be doing today. Not just today, maybe tomorrow as well. So, well, really, you should be doing all the time, but just right now, you do have a special skill there. So that's it, Aries. I think it looks like being a pretty okay day. Taurus. The moon is now out of Taurus. So yesterday we had this conjunction between the moon and Uranus in Taurus, in your sign, and I suppose that could have shaken things up a little, but now in a sense things are calming down. You don't feel the absolute need to do anything, but when you look around you, when you look at the world, it occurs to you that maybe things are not exactly perfect, that it may not be your fault. It just may be the way other people are behaving or misbehaving. And, if need be, Taurus, you're going to be actually quite good at telling people what to do and what not to do. You have a good sense of right and wrong, and I think that you carry, I would have said, a fair amount of authority. So if you come over in an authoritative way, I think people are going to just take you seriously. On the other hand, if you're too trivial and you just have an easygoing approach, then you're not perhaps going to get very far. So it's probably a day when you need to make some effort to take things seriously. Yes, a serious approach is important. And also, Taurus, there could be a certain sense of justice here, because, Venus is your ruler, and as we know, Venus is in Leo, but Venus is trine Chiron, and Venus trine Chiron, I think it could be about justice in the sense of being aware of an injustice. So it may occur to you that someone is being treated badly, that someone perhaps has some wound that has been inflicted on them by society or by other people. Now, okay, that person could be you, and maybe you've got sort of complaints to make about the way you've been treated, but it may also be about other people and about fairness. And I think just overall fairness is going to be important to you, Taurus. And I just think that you're going to notice things which are unfair, maybe in your family, or if you're working, perhaps in your place of work, or just could be in the world at large. You'll just notice things that are unfair, and it will be obvious to you. And to begin with, you might be on your own. Today is somewhat insensitive. There's not a great deal of sensitivity today. People it's all about me putting my agenda forward, and there's not much time for reflection. But you, Taurus, you are able to understand things, not necessarily because you're incredibly emotional, but because you notice things, and it's all about noticing things. And once you notice things, things become obvious. And I think, Taurus, that there may come a point where it just occurs to you that just something has to be done. And actually, it's not going to be very difficult to do it. You can make someone happy or go some way towards making someone's life better without having to put in a huge amount of effort. It will just run fairly easily, and I think that you can be a real force for good today, Taurus. And yeah, it needn't be difficult. Though, Taurus, you may just have to accept that you have to do things differently. It's not a day for conforming. I think if you spend all your day conforming, you'll be missing, how shall I put it, a big chance to get some karmic brownie points. Sorry, that sounds rather crass. Anyway, that's it for Taurus. You know what needs to be done. Gemini. There is a lot of stuff going on in Gemini. We've got Mars in Gemini, we've got Moon in Gemini, we've got Jupiter in Gemini. We've got Moon making a conjunction to Mars in Gemini. We've got Moon making a conjunction to Jupiter in Gemini. We've got Moon on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint in Gemini. So Gemini, in many respects, the focus is on you. And it is an active day. It is a positive day. And you're perhaps one of the people who are there to make things happen. You're perhaps a leading actor rather than a supporting one. And so, Gemini, consider what needs to be done and consider what kind of impression you want to put over. Because it's almost like people are waiting for you. And I understand that does give you a certain amount of responsibility. So don't waste today. Decide what matters. And, with Gemini, there's sometimes a danger that Geminis can scatter their energy. Standard Gemini thing. You focus on about 6 different things, and you don't quite know which one to focus on, and you end up doing nothing. So it might be a good idea, Gemini, just to focus on just one thing, or maybe 2 things, because you're a Gemini. But Geminis like to do 2 things, but certainly not 3 or 4 things. So decide what matters, and then give it everything you've got. And remember, it's not just about action for the sake of action. You have to use your brain as well. You have to engage that. And, because right now your brain is on good form and you can see the details that matter, but you're able to go beyond the details. And I think that is going to be really useful. And although there's not a great deal of emotion today, all things being equal, today is not a particularly emotional day. That doesn't mean to say that you cannot have an impact on other people. I think it's because you have actually got quite a lot of energy at the moment. And people will pick up on this energy. And because you're able to be giving out so much energy, people, I think, will be attracted to you. And as a result, you may have an opportunity to bring people together. And I'm talking not just about on a one-to-one level, but on a group level. You can be the sort of the center of the group, and maybe there's an opportunity to show some kind of leadership, at least to begin with. It's not about necessarily being a leader, but it's perhaps about providing some kind of an impulse for other people to cooperate. And I think that Gemini could be very useful. And so overall, Gemini, I think it's quite an action-packed day. It's a day where it's very easy to waste things. You could very easily just put energy into the wrong place, and that would be a shame. But use your brain, use your intellect to work out what needs to be done, where you're required, where you feel you can have the biggest impact, and then just act accordingly. Cancer. Well, there's always this tension, isn't there, in astrology between aspect and position. So let me explain that. You can have, say, for example, the moon is in, let us say, the 12th house from Cancer. So you think moon in the 12th house from Cancer. In astrology, the 12th house is normally connected with sort of isolation, being perhaps away from society, feeling you don't really want to get involved. That's why the 12th house in astrology is often connected with maybe monasteries, or I suppose on a negative sense, prisons, when you're sort of away from things. In India, the 12th house is actually connected with foreign travel, because I think traditionally foreign travel is not considered to be a good thing, because you're away from home. You perhaps have to go abroad to make money or to find your fortune, but so it can be a bit difficult. But ideally then you come back home. So that's why in Indian astrology I believe there is a connection between travel and the 12th house, not the 9th house. But on the other hand, when we're talking about the moon, which is of course what we're really talking about, because the moon is your ruler. The moon, yes, it's in your 12th house. It's in Gemini. It's not in Cancer yet. So it's, in one sense, it's in quite a secluded position. But on the other hand, the moon is making a conjunction to Mars. It's making a conjunction to Jupiter. The moon is on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. So that indicates a certain amount of action. You're not just happy, just doing your own thing in your own way, secluded in your monastery, in your cave. That's not what it's about. It's about really being able to make things happen in your own way first, in your own terms. So with moon on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, moon, your ruler on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint in Gemini, you're thinking about what can be done and what you can do. And Cancer, I think it's very clear to you that there are a lot of things that you can do. There are a lot of opportunities. Now, you may not want to take advantage of those opportunities straight away, but I think that you're going to feel that you perhaps need to do some active preparation. So active preparation is preparation that isn't, you haven't just disappeared. You're actively trying to work out what the next step is, and it takes a little bit of time, but at the same time, you do need to be noticed a bit. You do need to have some kind of interaction with the world out there. Perhaps you have to ask questions. Perhaps you have to take sudden initiatives just to make sure everyone understands things, and make sure also that you understand things. So don't let the day pass by, and also be curious. Very important, Cancer, to be curious today. I know that Cancer as a sign has a cautious streak, and that is absolutely right, but a bit of curiosity can be very, very useful. You can perhaps not understand something, you ask, or you explore even. You don't have to go out of your way to explore. You don't have to go to the jungle to explore, but you can find things out. And what you're doing is you are preparing for the next stage. The moon will go into Cancer pretty soon. I suppose moon will go into Cancer, sort of Wednesday, by midweek. Moon will be in Cancer, and then you'll be able to take advantage of some of the opportunities that come with that. So I think you need to be very awake, and you have to just get get the balance right. Sure, you don't want to be right there in the middle of a fray, surrounded by people being pushed this way and that. No, you don't want that. But on the other hand, you don't want to be entirely isolated, because you need to know what's going on. That's just really important. Leo, you are in, I think, a fairly sociable mood. You enjoy other people's company, and I think that you can make people feel good. It's just because, you're a Leo, aren't you? Sun in Leo. Sun works very well in Leo. The Sun is still sextile Mars, and when you're with people, they're going to really, I think, enjoy your company. And also you can make people feel alive, and it's just to do with the energy that's going around. Today overall is quite a high energy day. It's not about reflection. It's about pushing things out, being active, being creative, and you can be part of this. And when you're with people, I just think that they're going to really appreciate your company, and you can afford to be dynamic in a social sense. It's a time for really pushing it in terms of how you relate to people, how you interact with people. So perhaps in the past you'd had doubts about whether or not you can approach someone, whether or not you can talk to someone. But now I think the doubts are lifting, and you are actually able to be fairly assertive. And if there's anything in your social life that you don't like, that needs to be changed, then I think actually you're in a very good position to do it. So that is an opportunity for you. So it's Leo, it's just not really a day for being shy. It's a day for just being as extroverted as you can. Now, I say that because Leo does have a certain reputation for being extroverted, but I think it's incorrect. Every sign has its introverts and its extroverts. And sure, there are extroverted Leos and there are introverted Leos, and you could be either. So what you need to do, Leo, is to consider who you are. Are you an introverted Leo? I've certainly met many introverted Leos. And if you're an introverted Leo, you just have to be as extroverted as you can. You don't want to make yourself feel uncomfortable, but really try to interact. If you're an extroverted Leo, well, there's no problem. It's all second nature, isn't it? You can be the life and soul of the party, and I think that other people really are going to appreciate it. Virgo, you are probably fairly ambitious at the moment. I mean, I think you may have been starting to get a little bit ambitious yesterday, but I think it's intensifying now, Virgo, and it's all to do with the fact, Virgo, that we do have 3 planets in Gemini. We've got Mars in Gemini, Moon in Gemini, Jupiter in Gemini, and Gemini in a Virgo chart is very high profile. It's pretty ambitious, and there are things that you want, and you probably want them sooner rather than later. And it is a day when it is actually okay to be pushy. It's okay to be very clear about what you want, to be active, creative. You're out there making demands. It's okay. It's almost expected of you. So Virgo, there's no need to be shy, no need to be too shy, and certainly no need to overanalyze the situation, because it really is okay. I need to turn my phone off. I will do that very soon. So there's no need to be overly analytical. That is not going to be useful. You've got to be analytical up to a point. I mean, Mercury is moving through Virgo. I mean, it's slowing down in Virgo, but still it is in Virgo. And so with Mercury in Virgo, there is an ability to analyze. I won't say you can take it for granted, but your brain is on good form. I think that you can, in most cases, trust yourself to make the right decisions, and don't get too over analytical, because it's time to be telling the world who you are and what you want, and you can perhaps be more communicative than usual, and also more optimistic than usual. Virgos can sometimes be, I won't say pessimistic, but they can sometimes just analyze things a little too much, and there can be a certain amount of negativity there. But it's a time, Virgo, to be positive, to just think about what can be achieved, because if you're honest with yourself, you'll appreciate that actually a great deal can be achieved, and I think in many cases you will be able to communicate what you want really very effectively. So Virgo, don't hold back. It's a time when people need to appreciate your many talents, and of course this is going to be most important in terms of career and business. If you happen to be working, of course, if you're retired, that might not be relevant, or if you're not working. But if you are working in any capacity, it's going to be a day when you really want to make an impact, when you can make an impact, and your ideas are going to be very useful. People are going to be really interested in what you have to say. I mean, maybe you've done a research, maybe intellectually you can just understand things quickly, but you've done a research, you've got some brilliant ideas, and okay, your ideas may not be 100% perfect, maybe they need to be talked about, they need to be worked through, but fundamentally your ideas are good, and I think people want to hear about them. And you shouldn't be afraid of making a fool of yourself. Sometimes you might have an idea and you might be thinking that's a ridiculous idea. You're not going to talk about it. But who knows? Who is the judge of ridiculousness? Perhaps you need to just say what's on your mind and just get some feedback. And you may get some very useful feedback, and maybe what you thought was a bad idea could actually be a brilliant idea, just if a little bit of work is done on it. Libra, you're able to see things in a new way. You're really able to see the possibilities, and in many respects it's your kind of day. Possibilities are important, and perhaps recently you'd felt that your horizons might have been somewhat limited, but not anymore. I think that you know that it's a big world out there, and there are lots of things you can do, and you don't have to be satisfied with where you are or what you have right now. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to suddenly make dramatic physical changes or change your location or move to the other side of the world. It's not really about that. It's about perhaps changing your perspective, because change does happen first of all on a sort of a mental and perhaps a philosophical level, changing how you perceive the world, and perhaps where not so long ago you saw limitation, you now start to see opportunity, and some very real opportunities are starting to make themselves felt. Okay, you do have to make a little bit of an effort, but this is where your energies should be. Your energies should be moving out, moving up, rather than downwards, inwards. It's not that kind of day. It's a day for action rather than reaction. And it's a day for being positive rather than negative, and especially the case if you're a Libra, because I think in many cases, or in most cases, you're just in tune with what's happening in the world. Now, one thing I should say, I'm talking about action. From an emotional perspective, from a purely emotional perspective, then, okay, I'm not saying it's going to be a great day. Heliocentrically, Venus is opposition Saturn. But that's about how you relate to people in the world on an emotional level. But you don't have to relate to the world on an emotional level. It's not an emotional day. If other people try to get you to relate emotionally to them, or you get involved in something that seems to be getting emotional, you don't want to have anything to do with it. Emotions are not your strong suit, and they're certainly not your strong suit today. It's about action, mental action, perhaps physical action as well. And, whatever you're doing, even if you're doing something that seems fairly routine and boring, Libra, there's always another way of doing it. There's another way of doing it in such a way that it becomes interesting and exciting and something that, really stimulates you. So, Libra, do take advantage of what is happening today. Now, Libra, there may, having said all that, be a certain sense of obligation, maybe, because Venus is trine Chiron. Now, it might sound strange for me to say Venus trine Chiron is about obligation. So I perhaps need to sort of explain that. So Chiron is supposedly the wounded healer. It's about wounds. It's about people who are perhaps suffering at some level. And so if that is the case, then you could say that Venus trine Chiron is perhaps allowing you to tune into that side of yourself, the wounded healer, perhaps. Perhaps through experience you understand things and you're able to give the benefit of that experience to other people. So the obligation there is perhaps to make things better for someone. Perhaps on the basis of your own experience. Perhaps you've had a difficult experience in the past and you're dealing with someone who's had a similar difficult experience, and you can give them the benefit of your experience, benefit of what's happened to you. I'm not going to use the word empathize. It's not about empathy. Today, empathy it's not an empathetic day. It's more active. It's like you listen to what someone's got to say, and you just understand it, and then you kind of say, do this, that, and this, or whatever. And so it's not about long periods of silence, empathy, all of that kind of psychotherapy stuff. It's not about that. It's just listening and responding, and in many cases not listening at all, just knowing what someone needs to do. Now, Chiron is not just a wounded healer, as I say pretty much ad nauseum. Chiron is the maverick, and so Venus trine Chiron, it's going to be easy today, Libra, for you to be different, for you to do things which break the pattern, which allow you to do something that is different. You might be afraid that you're going to get criticism. You might get some criticism, but I don't think you will. I think that today people are actually pretty open-minded. It's an active, fun-filled world we live in, and everyone's got their space, everyone's got their opportunity to create fun and create variety, and I suppose, well, maybe, I suppose is it like a Mardi Gras parade or whatever they do? I don't know what they are really, or where people dress up in their costumes. Maybe it's that kind of day where everyone wants to dress up in a costume. Whatever that costume is, it's carnival. And so what kind of costume, perhaps, Libra, do you want to wear today? Because I don't think you're going to be criticized. I don't think so. In fact, talking about costumes, Venus is biquintile Neptune. Venus is your ruler. Neptune is about the imagination. And biquintile is a very style-orientated aspect. So Venus biquintile Neptune, yeah, you can create whatever you like. You can be imaginative, and you can choose the style that you feel comfortable with, and don't be self-conscious about it. Scorpio, you, in one sense, Scorpio, are feeling quite good. You're feeling quite comfortable. You're feeling quite confident. On the other hand, you're not really going with the flow. And by that I mean that today there is a lot of stuff going on, that is true. And you know that there's a lot of stuff going on, but you don't entirely want to be involved with it. It's not because you're afraid, or because you're nervous, or because you're feeling embarrassed, or you're worried what people might say. It's just that I think you possibly want to make a conscious decision to do things your way. And your way is different from what other people want, and or at least what other people appear to want. And so it's perhaps a day when you can just be an individual, and if people want to talk to you, interact with you, that's fine. But if you're left alone, that's also fine. In fact, I suppose there may be times today, especially this morning, especially if you're maybe in Europe, I suppose it could be Asia, Australia, New Zealand, but perhaps particularly Europe, and perhaps Africa, where there could be a certain amount of anger. Something could just make you angry, but it's not really something that's going to make you angry in a huge way. It's just going to make you angry enough that you just want to say something, and your words could be quite stinging, and you could just get annoyed very quickly about something stupid. And Scorpio, I think that would not be a good idea, because it just would be out of keeping with the day's general atmosphere. So if anything does annoy you, if at all possible, try to keep that annoyance to yourself, or perhaps try to look at things from a different perspective. And having a different perspective, it's going to be important, because you're not fully able to go with the flow, or no, not even able, you just don't want to go with the flow. You very much are an individual. But don't completely ignore the rest of the world. I don't think, I think that would be a bad idea. because you can still very much have an impact. And when you make the effort, it will be very clear. So perhaps if you just decide you're going to do something right now, you're going to move, and you feel that something needs to be said, something needs to be done, you just appear on the scene, and very quickly you can make things happen. And having made things happen, having done what you need to do, then you can just retreat. So Scorpio, it's just a day when you are completely in control, but you want to do things your way, and your way is in many cases not other people's way. So it just might be a good idea to have a little bit of distance, and at the same time just look at what other people are doing. Also look at what other people are doing wrong, and also consider how other people might be inspiring. Because people might do things that are wrong, but they might also be doing things that are right, or at least almost right, and that might in itself be quite exciting, because you just are starting to see what could be possible, because Scorpio, many things are possible. It's just that you're holding something back, and perhaps it's just a question of you just refining your plans, and that's it. But I'm thinking overall, Scorpio, it's quite an interesting day, but it's a day which really does emphasize the point that you are an individual and you are not someone to follow the crowd. Sagittarius. I don't think that any Sagittarian is an island, and certainly not today you're not an island. You absolutely understand that people have an impact, and that whatever you're doing, you can't do it entirely on your own, that you have to relate what you're doing to the outside world. And this is just a reminder that since end of May, Jupiter has been moving through Gemini, which is your opposite sign. And so with Jupiter moving through Gemini, you do understand that other people matter. But it doesn't mean to say that you have to do things other people's way, not at all, but other people do matter, and whatever you're doing, you do have to take into consideration their reactions and their input. Now, as far as today is concerned, I think that you can benefit from other people. There's particularly, it seems to be one other person who you can particularly benefit from them. So, you can particularly benefit from them. And so you've got to give people a chance to work their magic, whatever that magic might be. And it is a two-way process. You have got your own magic to contribute, but what kind of magic have other people got? And that magic could be quite important and could be really very interesting. And so do take advantage of it, and do be optimistic. And as the day progresses, the moon starts to move towards a conjunction with Jupiter. So as the moon moves towards a conjunction of Jupiter, you do become more optimistic and more enthusiastic. And I think that people pick up on this enthusiasm, and really it all works very well. Just don't get sidetracked by things that are negative, by things from the past. I suppose there is a small possibility there. I suppose Jupiter is making a square to Black Moon Lilith. Now that is a first. That's the first time in my interpretations for the for the 12 signs, which I've been doing for a long time now. That is the first time that I've used Black Moon Lilith. This is it. This is it. This is it. The first time I've used Black Moon Lilith in my forecast for any of the signs. So you're the first. So Jupiter square Jupiter square true Black Moon Lilith. So Black Moon Lilith, is perhaps it might be about focusing too much on the dark side. That might be one way of looking at it. Or I suppose if we think about it, it may be that if you are working or involved in any sort of business, because Black Moon Lilith is in Virgo at the moment and it's square Jupiter, you just might be aware that something is not quite right. Something that seems straightforward, there's a darkness there, there's an unpleasantness there, and something is being hidden, and you don't want to get obsessed about it. You don't want it to completely destroy your peace of mind, because remember, it is a good, optimistic day, but it's just I suppose it might be sort of trouble in paradise, is it? You're in paradise, yet you just see that something is not quite right. Again, you don't have to do anything immediately, but just take note of it. And perhaps it's a situation that needs to be observed. And perhaps at a later stage, in a few days' time or even a few weeks' time, you might be in a better position to respond to the situation. So, something to consider, but just don't get obsessed about it, because overall, it's a great day when I think that you can really make the most of other people and what they've got to offer, and of course, you yourself have got a huge amount to offer. Capricorn. You probably feel, Capricorn, that there is a lot to do. You regard yourself as being an organized person who's in control, and everything is straightforward. At least everything was straightforward in the past, but now just things look a little bit untidy, a little bit chaotic, and you're just about wondering, well, what's happened? How did it get to be like this? Now, it's just important not to exaggerate. It just may be that perhaps you're more sensitive than usual to things that are not in good order. But if something is chaotic, then, well, maybe something has to be done about it. That might be the view you take. But if so, it's just important to do it with a good spirit. It's just not a big deal, and your actions can very quickly sort things out. And also, you perhaps need to consider the impact that other people have on you. The moon is ruler of Cancer, and the moon is currently on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. And so with moon on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, that suggests to me a person who has a lot of energy. And they want things to move, they want things to happen, and they're in a little bit of a hurry. And this person can, I think, have a very beneficial influence on you. They can help move you along. They can perhaps help you just see the world in a slightly different way and realize that there are more opportunities perhaps than you had realized. So if you see high energy people, if there are high energy people around you, give them a chance. See what they're doing. Try to understand what they've got to offer. Now, you can reject it if need be. That is absolutely possible. But yeah, it's just important to give people a chance. And, once you've understood everything, then you're in a better position to take successful action yourself. Because actually, Capricorn, you can be very dynamic when you want to be. And if you feel that something needs to be done and you want to be decisive, you really can be decisive. And once you start being decisive, people really will take you seriously, and they will, I think, do things your way. So it's not that you're in a weak position. Far from it, Capricorn. And I think that you really need to understand your strengths, but also understand the strengths and the enthusiasm of other people, because I think that you can benefit from them, and it's not just today is not just a solo initiative. And it might be just a good idea right now to really understand certain people, really understand what makes them tick, understand why they're doing what they're doing. And one reason it might be a good idea to understand what they're doing is because perhaps later on, when there's perhaps a possibility of disagreements, maybe tomorrow, for example, tomorrow the moon makes a square to Saturn. Tomorrow, when I'll be talking about that moon square Saturn tomorrow, there could be the possibility of a misunderstanding, a disagreement, a clash, where there are perhaps different priorities. If you familiarize yourself with the situation, with another person's way of looking at the world now, you'll perhaps be preparing yourself for some of the challenges which may manifest themselves, for example, tomorrow with that moon square Saturn. But don't worry about tomorrow too much. It's today that matters. Aquarius, you are, I think, in a pretty creative frame of mind. You feel that there are lots of things that you would like to be doing, that you want to be doing, and I don't think that you need to worry too much about what other people want, although you can't be entirely selfish. I mean, after all, the sun is in Leo. The sun represents the other person, whoever, other people in general. They are in Leo. They are in quite a strong position, but at the same time, it's your creative input that right now does really matter. And I think it's all about having fun. And whatever you're doing, you do it, because you're enjoying yourself. If you're doing something and you are not enjoying it, and you think it's boring, then Aquarius, then consider the possibility you shouldn't be doing it. Now, that's not normally good advice, because I suppose we're supposed to be resilient, and we're supposed to be able to do tedious stuff because we think we might get the rewards in the end. But I think that today, Aquarius, feeling something is good, enjoying it is just really important. Because if you're not enjoying it, Aquarius, you're just not going to be able to do a good job, and you'll just be wasting your time, and the standard of your work won't be very good. So put the focus on yourself, and that will be greatly appreciated. And when people see that you are enjoying yourself, when people see that you're being enthusiastic, they're going to want to know you. They're going to want to know what you're doing. They're going to want to get closer to you. And that's especially the case when we've got this Sun sextile Mars. The Sun is in Leo, which I've just talked about. Sun in Leo represents another person, but it's sextile Mars. That is a fortunate aspect, and the Mars is in Gemini, and Mars in Gemini is really, really very creative, and so you can appeal to people, but on your terms, but without being selfish. It's the way you want to do it that matters, and once you're doing things your way, everything will just flow nicely, and you'll just be a pleasant person to have around. So Aquarius, it looks to me like being, an exciting day when you can do what you want without being selfish. And I think that in the process, you will be actually having a big impact on the world without even trying to have an impact. And perhaps the reason you're having an impact is just through example. You're setting an example of how to behave, how to be an individual, because today individualism is really important, individual creativity, and that's what you are able to demonstrate. Pisces, you probably feel that you don't entirely want to engage with whatever else is happening around you. And, it is quite an active day. And there are things going on, things happening which, some of it you just might not fully understand it, but nonetheless, you feel that it's something you don't really want to know too much about. So there may actually be a certain sense of, how shall I put it, studied ignorance. You know what you know about it really, but you don't want to know about it. There are certain things you're just not interested in. You'd feel that if you find out too much about them, that might be distressing, or you might be pushed into a tangent. You might be pushed into a tangent, and you might just be going in places you don't want to go to. And that underlines the fact that right now, Pisces, you want to be yourself, and you don't want to be caught up in all the other stuff going on around you. So that's something that right now really is happening. Now I don't think this is bad at all. In fact, I think it's quite a good thing, because when you are in your own space, there's a lot that you're going to be able to accomplish. And the moon is in Gemini, and the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter. So that conjunction to Jupiter, whether it happens today or tomorrow, depends on your time zone, that conjunction between moon and Jupiter is going to make you feel very comfortable and very secure. And I should say that if you're a Pisces and you have any connection with property, land, houses, whether you're a renter or you're renting, whatever the issue is with property and land, if that's relevant, it could be quite important today for one reason or another. And perhaps you feel that the ground and the land and fixed assets are so important, require so much of your attention that really you don't want to focus on anything else. And that is fine. That's absolutely great. Because it's grounding for you. And other people aren't in the mood perhaps to be grounded. They've got their own plans, but those plans needn't affect you. And I suppose, going back to studied ignorance, maybe you don't need to know about their plans. Although I'm not convinced that ignorance is bliss. You always need to know. You need to know something. So I would have said, I would not have deliberately try to be ignorant. Try to find out what is happening. Just because you know about something, just because you get information, doesn't mean you're going to be affected by it. And on a negative note, I suppose I need to point out that Jupiter, which is your ruler, is currently square Black Moon Lilith, true Black Moon Lilith. I mentioned this to Sagittarius, and I mentioned I hadn't really looked at Black Moon Lilith in terms of the 12 sign astrology before today. But anyway, I'm doing it now. Now, Jupiter square Black Moon Lilith, it's not just a one-day wonder. It will be around for a bit of time. And with Jupiter square Black Moon Lilith, it may represent something about other people. Black Moon Lilith is in Virgo, which is your opposite sign. And so with Jupiter square Black Moon Lilith, it perhaps represents the unpleasantness in another person or the darkness in another person. Remember, Black Moon Lilith is in Virgo, your opposite sign, and you're just aware of it. And perhaps you need to work out what this means. Maybe it's all about just seeing human nature for what it is. It's not a threat to you. You're just seeing people. Everyone has their dark side. I've got a dark side. You've got a dark side. We've all got a dark side. So it's not anything to worry about. But maybe, Pisces, you may start to be aware of something difficult about someone that maybe you should know about. It might be about their past. It might be about their capacity for unpleasantness. And that awareness might be useful, but don't let it overwhelm you. I mean, I think that's perhaps your fear. The reason you don't want to ask too many questions is because you don't want to be overwhelmed. But you have to kind of get yourself into a position, Pisces, where you can ask questions, get information. This may be emotional information, although I understand that today there's not a great deal of emotion flowing around. But you're a Pisces, you're always emotional at some deep level, so you can pick things up. Even if only Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces, those are the two planets in water signs, but you're picking things up and getting some insights into another person and realizing and understanding that they have got a capacity for doing bad things. Doesn't mean they will do bad things, but I suppose being aware of that capacity is kind of going to be useful. But don't worry, Pisces. You stick to what matters to you. Sure, ask a few questions, but stick to what matters to you, and things are going to be fine. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at today, Tuesday, from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first and only hexagram I got was number 42, increase. And it didn't move anywhere. There are no moving lines. Now, this hexagram is pretty good, as its name sounds, as its name implies. But because there are no moving lines, there is a suggestion that there isn't much action here. I mean, I know that when I was talking about the astrology for today, I was talking about a fair amount of action. The fact that the moon was, on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint in Gemini. Yeah, there was a lot of action, but in terms of the I Ching, it's just suggesting that not a great deal is happening, but it is increase. So we're in a position where we can improve things, and an improvement basically starts with ourselves. So we look at what is good in ourselves. and we boost it. We intensify and increase what is good. And by the same token, if we've got bad habits, then we reject them, and we discard them. We don't need it. And with this hexagram increase, there is a certain sense of sacrifice here, that if we want to develop and have a successful life, be happy, there's very often something that has to be given up. And perhaps we have to consider, what is it? There's something, isn't there? There's something that we are just a little bit obsessed about, something we're stuck on that really isn't doing us any good. It's okay, it may not be damaging us, but it's just preventing us from taking advantage of everything that's around us. So what is it that has to be given up? And we may get some hints by looking at the nuclear hexagram. So the nuclear hexagram is the hexagram behind the hexagram. So the nuclear hexagram is when we take off the top and the bottom lines, we can see that we've got an unbroken line with lots of broken lines underneath. So we can conceive of that nuclear hexagram as hexagram 23, which is splitting apart. Now, this is not the hexagram for today, but it is the nuclear hexagram. It gives us an idea about what it's all about. Splitting apart is about evil, dealing with disruptive forces. And maybe this is in a way what we're coming away from increase. So splitting apart, there has perhaps been recently a splitting apart. We've decided to distance ourselves from something. We've realized it's no good. We've moved on. And so when we move to increase, having moved out of this sort of splitting apart experience, there are still some remnants there, aren't there? Remnants of bad habits, perhaps maybe even contacts with other people that from the past that really aren't doing us any good, and we just perhaps need to just let go of them. And that act of letting go, of sacrifice, allows us to move on. And increase can literally mean material increase. I mean, that is possible. So today might be a day, if you think that money is owed to you, or something is owed to you, or you can get hold of something, then you can find it, or perhaps you can find a way of increasing how much you're paid, or some activity which is really working well for you, whatever it is. It might be a charitable activity, it might be a commercial activity, it might be, I don't know, reading a book, whatever that activity you're involved in that seems to be really working for you, you can increase it. And you increase it, you put more energy into it, it's already working well, and then it works even better for you. And so in a quiet way, it all comes together. And so as a person, I think today that we can really develop. I'm not going to say any more about it. It's a locked hexagram. It doesn't move anywhere. I don't think there are any real complications here, but I think it's just really good, and it's just important to take what is good about ourselves and just to give that thing just more and more energy, and it will become a virtuous circle. So let me now turn to the news. I mean, I'm a bit chaotic here. There are just a couple of random things I want to talk about without having any specific theme. So I thought I'd start with Venezuela. Now, I don't know really anything about Venezuela, but I do know that there was an election, and the government party claims to have won. I don't know, did they say they got 51% of the vote? And everyone in the West is crying fraud. Of course, the Chinese and the Russians and I think the Iranians and the Cubans have congratulated the Venezuelan president on his victory. So, I suppose the truth is in the eye of the beholder. What is the truth? I don't know. But a lot of people are saying, the mainstream media are saying it's a fraudulent election. Maybe the mainstream media is right, but we should never take these things on face value at all. So let's start by looking at, where should we start? Let's start by looking at the chart of Venezuela. Well, we'll sort of move around. We do have a chart of Venezuela. Apparently Venezuela came into being on September the 22nd, 1830. So 4:27 p.m. I'm not quite sure how we managed to get 4:27 p.m. I mean, that seems an incredibly accurate time, 4:27 p.m. But still, for some reason, I've got 4:27 p.m. here. And there we've got, notice the moon in Sagittarius. That is important, the moon in Sagittarius, as we will see. And so Venezuela has a Sun-Mars opposition. I mean, it's sort of late Virgo country, Venezuela, with that Sun-Mars opposition. It's problematic, isn't it, having that Sun-Mars opposition right now, because Neptune is opposition Venezuela's Sun, and it's sort of, it's going to soon be, Neptune is going to be opposition Venezuela's Sun-Mars midpoint. So that could be a little bit of a problem for Venezuela. And look at Venezuela's Saturn, and 26 degrees Leo. So we have got Uranus square Saturn. In fact, we can actually see Venezuela in terms of the chart for victory declared. I believe victory was declared by the government in Venezuela 1 minute after midnight. So I don't know about the exact time, but we'll take on July the 29th, which is today. And so there's that moon. Mercury is square the moon. That was when victory was declared. Mercury square the moon. There's a certain amount of tension there, I think we can say. And I suppose if you're into sort of dark moon Lilith was at 8 Virgo, so dark moon Lilith at the time of the declaration was on Venezuela's Venus, and as we've said, Neptune is going to be opposition Venezuela's Sun and Mars for quite a time, and so the Sun may represent the president, Maduro. Perhaps, I mean, he's a sort of a universal significator of the president. But I think we can certainly see the instabilities now creeping in. I don't think this election is going to help in terms of stability. And Uranus is pretty much square Venezuela's Saturn. And remember, we just had a Mars-Uranus conjunction. We had a Mars-Uranus conjunction on July the 15th, which would have been square Venezuela's Saturn. We've got Venus. Venus is moving to a conjunction of Venezuela's Saturn later in the week, and that Venus will be square Uranus. So Saturn is under pressure there. I think we can very much see that, and so I wonder to what extent this election has solved anything. Look at Venezuela's Uranus. Venezuela's Uranus in 1830 was at 646 Aquarius, and so they've had the election with the Sun opposition Uranus. So I think we can see some of the drama of this election in terms of Venezuela's chart. Now, the president of Venezuela is, his name is Nicolás Maduro. I don't have a time of birth, but he was born on November the 23rd, 1962. So here is his chart. I suppose you might notice that he hasn't got any Earth in his chart. I mean, it's not unusual not to have any Earth in your chart, I suppose. But if you're running Venezuela, you know, you've got to be really organized, haven't you, running a country like Venezuela? I mean, its economy has been run into the ground. And I suppose to a great extent by Maduro and his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. And perhaps Nicolás Maduro, with his lack of Earth, perhaps doesn't have a full grip on what's actually going on in his country in an economic sense. But he's got ideas. He's a Sagittarius. Got sun at 0 degrees Sagittarius, definitely sun in Sagittarius, whatever time of day he was born. So with the sun in Sagittarius, I suppose he likes to think beyond this. Sagittarius is about the big idea. It can be a very moral planet sign, Sagittarius. You know, Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's ruled by Jupiter. And so Sagittarians can actually have a clear sense of right and wrong. Now, Maduro's sun in Sagittarius is actually hitting Venezuela's own chart. So let's look at, if we see what is Maduro doing to Venezuela. So here's Maduro's chart is on the outer wheel, and so there's Venezuela's moon at 2 degrees 28 Sagittarius. So he's got his sun on Venezuela's moon. Now, from an electoral point of view, that's probably quite useful. The moon represents the people. And so the people may, to an extent, be favourably disposed towards their president. But that's not, of course, going to be always the case. He has a connection with the people. I think before he got into politics, he was a union leader. I think he might have been a bus driver. That was his thing. You know, so he comes from a working class background. He's not part of the elite, or at least he doesn't. His background was not elitist, but he does have a certain rapport with ordinary Venezuelans. Now, he may have lost that rapport. That is absolutely possible. And we can perhaps also see some of the sort of irritation here. So, you know, there is Venezuela's Uranus. Uranus, I suppose, is the capacity to have a revolution, isn't it? I mean, that's one way of looking at it. The people are rebellious. Uranus in Aquarius, they're looking for something else. Then he has got Saturn in Aquarius. So perhaps you get the image here of Maduro's Saturn on Venezuela's Uranus. So he's perhaps trying to suppress the people's desire for change. So that is very much one way it could be working. But then on the other hand, his Uranus, 5 Virgo, is potentially conjunct Venezuela's 7th house cusp, if that time is right, but it's conjunct Venezuela's Venus. So he is stirring things up. I'm sorry I'm not being more precise about Venezuela. I've only just been looking at this election, but it does seem that this election will have, I suppose, aftershocks. I don't think it's necessarily a done deal, and we should remember that the enemies of the regime in Venezuela are going to be doing everything they can to undermine it. I think there have already been calls for the military to step in That's what the United States would want to do. I mean, that's always what the United States wants to do. Sort of take back control of its client states in South America. That's how it always was, isn't it? So American influence always can never be entirely disregarded. So that's Venezuela. I mean, they were talking about deals. Someone was suggesting that there might be a deal where the United States would give Maduro immunity and then he'd be able to leave the country. That's the way the United States is feeling about it. But I don't think I want to say anything else about the election. But it does look like it being a difficult time for Venezuela at the moment, with Neptune opposition its Sun, and Neptune moving on to its Sun-Mars midpoint. So I don't think that Maduro can think that it's just a done deal, that he's won the election and everyone will just go home. I think it might be more complicated than that. So turning to something else, there is the attack on Saturday in northern Israel, where I think 12 children were killed. They were playing football. So here's the chart for the attack. I don't really have a great deal to say about the chart for the attack. I didn't think that the chart was especially dramatic. I mean, it didn't. This was the attack on this town of Majdal Shama, which took place at 6:18 p.m. So I didn't think there was much going on here astrologically. Nothing really hit me here, and I suppose this is perhaps a reminder that when you've got a war, which you seemed effectively to have, you're going to get a lot of attacks on both sides, and when you get so many attacks, which attack is actually going to have which attack is going to really show up as being something important. So perhaps we should see this attack in terms of Israel and Netanyahu. So here is Netanyahu's chart. So Netanyahu is... here's Benjamin Netanyahu, his horoscope. And I don't know the exact time of Netanyahu's birth. He was certainly born late. He seems to be. Everyone says he was born late morning, and when you look at the times people are suggesting, it always comes up with Sagittarius rising. So I think we can be fairly certain that Netanyahu has Sagittarius rising, but we don't know precisely when that is and whereabouts in Sagittarius. And so this is how the attack related to Netanyahu, and this just reminds us that Uranus is exactly square Netanyahu's Mars. So it's exact. Right now, Netanyahu has Uranus right on his Mars. So Netanyahu will be, I suppose, doing whatever he can to attack. He is kind of in attack mode, and he is, I suppose, trying to create instability, and I think that is perhaps an important part of what he's doing. I mean, instability, I suppose, in terms of maybe America's relationship with the Middle East. There is a view that Netanyahu is just trying to stir things up because he wants to get the United States involved. And so if he is trying to do that, you would have thought with Uranus square his Mars, he is really in the mood for attacking things. And we had the Mars-Uranus conjunction on the 15th of July. But what happens later on in this week, I think it's on Friday, there is a Venus-Uranus square. So look at Venus. Venus at the time of the attack was at 1936 Leo. So it is moving towards Mars. So So this Friday, Venus will be conjunct Netanyahu's Mars at the same time as Uranus is square his Mars. Now, I would argue it doesn't really matter what Venus means. That Venus could be a trigger. So you could say that as Venus moves closer and closer to his Mars, he is more likely to be prepared to actually do something about it, and really perhaps do something dramatic. And I think this drama is going to continue. And we shouldn't forget that on August the 19th, there is a full moon. And this full moon, the full moon is... where's this full moon? The full moon on August the 19th. Here's the full moon on August the 19th. So this full moon is at 27:15 Aquarius. So going back to Netanyahu's chart, this full moon is right on Netanyahu's Mars at a time where the Sun and Mercury will be squaring his Mars as well. So this full moon on August the 19th is going to really impact Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, one thing about Benjamin Netanyahu is that he was born on October the 21st, and he's recently been to the United States, and he gave a speech to Congress, and Kamala Harris had alternative arrangements. And of course, she's been very much criticized on the right for not listening to Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. That was seen to be in some way disrespectful. So Benjamin Netanyahu was born just before a new moon. You can see that he was born on just before a new moon at around 27, 28 Libra, born on October the 21st. But it's interesting that Kamala Harris was born on October the 20th. So she different year, obviously, but with Benjamin Netanyahu being born on the 21st, Kamala Harris born on the 20th, there seems to be perhaps this weird connection between these two people. And, I'm thinking, with when we've got an election coming up, this sort of has echoes of 1968 with Vietnam. There is a view that Nixon deliberately sabotaged peace talks with North Vietnam for electoral advantage. He was telling he was telling the South Vietnamese to hold back because he didn't want the Democrats to take advantage to be able to benefit from a peace talks. So that was from benefit from peace in South Vietnam. And so there is a view, that the Nixon regime, there was a woman who was his go-between, I forget what her name was. She was some Chinese-American socialite, and she was supposedly negotiating with the South Vietnamese and asking them not to give too much away before the 1968 election. And we've kind of got potentially a similar situation here. Clearly, Netanyahu wants Trump to win, and Netanyahu is going to do everything he can to make it, within his power, to make things difficult for the Democrats. And of course, Netanyahu is up against potentially Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is the person he wants to lose. So it's a difficult position, perhaps, for the Democrats, because they have to be nice to Netanyahu, but Netanyahu may be doing everything he can to engineer a situation in which the Democrats lose. So a complicated situation now. And so what is the connection between Netanyahu and Kamala Harris? So here is the synastry between Benjamin. So we've got Kamala Harris in her chart is in the center, and on the outer wheel we have got Benjamin Netanyahu's chart. And so there is Kamala Harris's exact full moon when she was born, and you can see it is conjunct, the sun is conjunct Benjamin Netanyahu's new moon. And so they've got a connection here. We can't get round that. And the clash, the personality clash between these two people is also shown perhaps by the Mars. Look at, there's Kamala Harris's Mars and Netanyahu's Mars is, they're 5 degrees apart, 5.5 degrees apart. So you could say that Benjamin Netanyahu was born with a Mars-Pluto conjunction. And so his Mars-Pluto conjunction is right on Netanyahu's, on Kamala Harris's natal Mars. Now, Kamala Harris has a Mars-Saturn opposition. Not a very strong Mars-Saturn opposition, but it's sort of strong perhaps because it's angular. She's got Saturn quite close to the midheaven, Mars on the IC. So there's her Saturn-Mars opposition. So Netanyahu's Mars is opposition Kamala Harris's Saturn. So there's some real friction here. And I think you can see how perhaps Netanyahu and Kamala Harris are really trying to undermine each other. And one wonders who's going to win out. So it's a difficult situation. I think it's a particularly difficult situation for Kamala Harris. And I don't know, it's not going to get any easier, is it? Because we are going to have a full moon on August the 19th, right on Kamala Harris's, well, pretty close to Kamala Harris' Saturn and pretty close to Netanyahu's Mars. So, yeah, the Middle East certainly looks interesting. And I think also the dynamics of the relationship between Kamala Harris and Benjamin Netanyahu are also very interesting. And finally, J.D. Vance. He has been getting a fair amount of criticism recently, mainly from the Democrats. I wonder why they're making so much fuss about J.D. Vance. They're saying he's a loser. The mainstream media is really saying that J.D. Vance is going to damage the Trump ticket. Are they trying to gaslight Donald Trump? It's almost as if they are. They're trying to gaslight Donald Trump into making him think that it was a bad VP pick. I mean, maybe it was a bad VP pick. I don't know. But turning to J.D. Vance's horoscope, I'm not going to spend long on this. Just a reminder, this is J.D. Vance's horoscope, now that we have it. So here is the man who made this remark about childless cat women. Do get the context right. He was really talking about the people running the Democratic Party, and I think to an extent he was perhaps focusing on Kamala Harris. And obviously it was not a nice thing to say, and obviously something he shouldn't have said. But here is he's the kind of person that does say that kind of stuff, because there's his Mercury in Virgo in the first house square Uranus. So Mercury square Uranus just says a load of stuff, doesn't it? I mean, that's just the nature of the aspect. And also with J.D. Vance, his ascendant, we do have an exact time of birth for J.D. Vance, 8:11 a.m. And we come up with this 27 fixed. And this 27 fixed is, it's being triggered by Uranus. Uranus is moving towards a square of his ascendant. It goes stationary at around 27:11. It doesn't quite make the square, but it's sort of activated at the moment. And so perhaps this may be why he's getting so much flack. And I mean, I don't know how serious this flack is. My hunch is that it's but people are playing games, but people are, that maybe the Democrats are trying to just making a special effort to undermine Vance. This is what politicians do. But he does have to watch out with Mars square his Uranus, and of course Vance is going to be impacted by the full moon on on October the 19th. So if you look at Vance's chart on... So this gives an idea about October. You see there is Vance's ascendant, descendant line. And right, that full moon is right on his ascendant and ascendant-descendant axis. I wonder how that's going to manifest. I mean, clearly the Democrats are trying their best to undermine him. It seems as if they want Trump to drop him from the ticket, although there is a counter view that I think the Democrats think that it would be in Trump's advantage to drop Vance from the ticket. So by saying that they should drop him from the ticket, they're guaranteeing that Trump will keep Vance on the ticket. So there's a bit of confusion about what the Democrats are intending there. But certainly Vance is going to be under pressure in August with this, particularly when you hit this full moon. And this full moon, as you can see, this full moon is exactly on Uranus, so that Uranus will be square his ascendant and descendant, and sort of quite. Remember, he's got Mars on the IC, so he's quite a defensive, private person in his own way. So yes, Vance is under pressure, and we got Venus on Friday. Remember, Venus is square Uranus, so that means Venus is going to be on Vance's ascendant, and Uranus is going to be square his ascendant, so as it is now. So yeah, so that's Vance's chart. Perhaps we need to consider it more. I mean, with Vance, I've looked at Vance's chart from a Vedic perspective, and from a Vedic perspective, I'm not going to look at his chart again right now, but from his Vedic chart, but his Vedic chart actually looks quite good, and his dashas and sub-dashas, how it's unfolding at the time of the election, also looks good. I'm not convinced that Trump would be well advised to drop Vance. I suspect that, from an astrological point of view, Vance is probably a plus on the ticket, but I do understand that right now he is under a lot of pressure. Okay, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed and you enjoyed this video, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.